You know that feeling when you need a dictionary just to get through the news? Or you're trying to explain something and you just get all tangled up in your own words? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. Well, today we're going to explore this really radical idea. It's actually about a century old, that was designed to cut right through all that confusion.
I mean, just think about a super simple word like run. You can run a race, right? But you can also run a company, run a fever, or a river can run its course. See? Our language is absolutely packed with this kind of complexity, and that can make communication, especially when you're talking across different cultures, a real challenge.
Okay, so what if you could explain all sorts of complex thoughts with just 850 words? I know, it sounds pretty much impossible, right? I mean, how could you possibly talk about science, or run a business, or even just describe your day with such a tiny, tiny set of tools? Well, what if I told you a system was designed to do exactly that? Right, so this system is called Basic English, and it was created as this really elegant solution to the whole problem of language being so complicated. But here's the key thing. It's not a brand new language. It's more like a simplified, super-controlled version of the English we already use.
And look, the goal here was never to replace English. Not at all. It was all about creating a tool for really clear international communication. The creator, Charles Ogden, he really believed he could boil the entire language down to its absolute essence, just a core set of words that could do pretty much all the heavy lifting.
And here's a really cool detail. That name, BASIC, it isn't just about being simple. It's actually an acronym. It stands for its intended uses: British, academic, scientific, international, and commercial. So you see, this was never just a language. It was a tool, specifically engineered for a purpose.
And believe me, this was not just some fleeting idea. Ogden kicked off this super ambitious project way back in 1925. And just a decade later, he was already expanding the vision, even bringing in designers to create something called the International Picture Language to go with it. I mean, that just shows how deeply committed he was to this one single goal, making ideas understandable to absolutely everyone.
Okay, so the big question is, how did he actually do it, right? How do you build an entire system for communication on such a tiny foundation? Well, it all comes down to this really carefully chosen toolkit of words.
Just look at that number for a second. 850. That's it. That's the entire toolkit. And that small size, that's the whole point. It was designed from the ground up to be learned fast by anyone, anywhere on the planet.
The real genius here is in the balance. So the list is mostly things. We're talking 600 nouns. Then you've got 150 qualities, adjectives, to describe all those things. But, and this is the really radical part, there are only 100 operations. And that tiny little group has to do all the work of verbs, prepositions, conjunctions, all of it combined. So if we zoom in on that list of 600 nouns, about 200 of them are what Ogden called picturable words. And that's exactly what it sounds like. They're concrete, tangible things you can literally point to or draw a picture of. We're talking about words like apple, house, or star. This focus on things you can actually see makes the language so much easier to learn and to, anchor in your mind.
Okay, so you've got the words. But, a pile of bricks isn't a house, right? The real magic here isn't just the word list. It's the simple set of rules for how you put them all together to build these big, complex ideas.
And yeah, this is the question everyone asks, right? But how can you possibly say everything you need to? How do you talk about complicated stuff like politics or emotions or technology with such a small vocabulary? You obviously can't just drop a bunch of words without a real plan.
Well, the power of this whole system comes from a really simple formula. You take those basic building blocks, those 850 words, you add a few clever rules to the mix, and suddenly you can construct almost anything you want to say.
Okay, so these rules are basically the engine of the whole system. Let's break them down. First up, you can make nouns plural. Book becomes books. Simple enough. Second, you can change verbs into adjectives. So boil becomes boiling, break becomes broken. Third, you can turn adjectives into adverbs by adding ly. Quick becomes quickly. Easy. Fourth, and this one is super clever, you can create opposites. You don't need a whole new word for unhappy, you just tack un onto happy. And finally, number 5, you can stick two nouns together to make a brand new word, like foot plus ball gives you football. Just with those 5 little rules, that core list of 850 words suddenly does the work of thousands.
So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, this is just some forgotten historical experiment, right?
But actually, the ghost of basic English is kind of all around us, quietly shaping how we all communicate, even right now.
You can really see its biggest impact today in projects that are all about making information accessible to everyone. The most famous example is probably the Simple English Wikipedia. It uses principles that come directly from basic English to make knowledge available to language learners or anyone with reading difficulties. And it's still a model for creating these controlled languages for things like international business or technical manuals.
Yeah, by sticking to Ogden's original word list and those simple rules, the Simple English Wikipedia makes its articles understandable to this massive global audience. We're talking about people who are learning English, or really anyone who just wants a clear, simple explanation without all the jargon.
And really, that brings us right back to the core mission behind this whole thing. It doesn't matter if it was 1925 or today, the goal underneath it all is exactly the same: to break down barriers, to make sure that important ideas aren't locked away behind complicated language.
I mean, we live in this age of just constant information overload, right? Endless complexity everywhere you look. And it really makes you wonder, could a simple 850-word solution from nearly a century ago, could that actually be one of the keys to a more understandable future?